In order for a vegetable garden to be successful, there are certain requirements that the plant has that must be met. The first is sunlight. Light coming from the sun is responsible for photosynthesis. It's a requirement for plants to grow and develop. They need moisture, water, either from rain or from supplemental irrigation. And then they need nutrients. Nutrients either from fertilizers or from compost or manures. Hello, I'm Richard Parrish. I'm the County Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources in Leon County. And I want to talk a little bit about preparing your garden by using fertilizers. Now, fertilizers will only work on plants, or plants will only benefit from fertilizers if nutrients are lacking. Fertilizers are not going to help if you have an excess water issue, or you've got a poor soil drainage, or if the plant is planted in the shade. Fertilizers won't help with that. They're only going to work if there is a nutrient lacking. And when we're talking about fertilizers, there's two broad categories of fertilizers that we would be referring to: the organic and the inorganic fertilizers. Those organic fertilizers are fertilizers such as manure, bone meal, cottonseed, and other naturally occurring materials, as opposed to the inorganic fertilizers. And these are materials that are man-made products. They usually have a higher nutrient content than the organic fertilizers do. Both do a great job in providing nutrients to our plants. When you buy a bag of fertilizer, there's typically 3 numbers on the box or on the bag of fertilizer. Those 3 numbers represent the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen is responsible for the growth of roots and leaves and stems and flowers and fruits. It gives the plant its green color, and nitrogen is also needed to form proteins within the plant. Phosphorus is needed for cell division, and it helps to form roots, flowers, and fruit. A deficiency in phosphorus causes stunted growth and poor fruiting and flowering of the plant. Potassium, the 3rd number, is used for many of the chemical processes that allow the plant to live and grow. A deficiency in phosphorus is shown as stunted growth, and you might even see a yellowish coloring of the lower leaves. There is a video or a resource video that you can view on the Leon County AgriLife Extension YouTube channel that goes into more detail about the importance and the role of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium within plants that you can go and view. So I mentioned that those 3 numbers represents the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in that fertilizer product. So for example, a 100-pound bag of fertilizer that has the numbers 10, 20, 10 on the label means that it contains 10 pounds of nitrogen, 20 pounds of phosphorus, and 10 pounds of potassium in that product. And the rest of the product in that might be micronutrients, or it could be fillers such as sand, perlite, and rice hulls that allow for even distribution of that nutrient throughout your garden. Well, how do you know what fertilizer to use in a garden? Well, hopefully by this point you've had a soil test done of your garden that will tell you exactly what type of fertilizer you need to grow the best vegetables possible. But in the absence of a soil test, you can use a complete fertilizer such as a 10-20-10 or a 12-24-12. Now, do not use a lawn fertilizer in your garden. Many times these lawn fertilizers might contain too much nitrogen so that you can burn your plants. And also these lawn fertilizers, some of them have weed chemicals in there for weed control in the lawn. And those products that control the weeds in your lawn can injure or kill your vegetables. So avoid using a lawn fertilizer in your garden. Now, when you're using a fertilizer, ideally the best thing to do is to have a soil test done to know exactly what type of fertilizer you need to use in your garden. Ideally, get your soil tested every 2 years, and that way you'll know exactly what the nutrient needs of your soil is. Here again on that Leon County AgriLife Extension YouTube channel, there is a video that talks about how to properly take a soil sample to get your soil tested. So I would encourage you to take a few moments and watch that video. So if you're needing more information about getting your soil tested, contact the local county extension office and we can help get you the information on how to collect the soil sample, how to send it off, and even how to interpret those results. But in the absence of a soil test, use about 2 to 3 pounds of that complete fertilizer, such as that 10-20-10 or that 12-24-12. Use 2 to 3 pounds of that complete fertilizer for every 100 square feet of garden area. Whenever you apply a fertilizer, you want to make sure that you water that fertilizer in very good. If you've got a sandy soil, probably go on the lower side of that 2 to 3 pounds. And so with a sandy soil, I would say you apply about 2 pounds of fertilizer per 100 square foot. Whereas if you have a more sandy soil, then I would go maybe on the upper side and apply about 3 pounds of fertilizer for every 100 square foot. If you're using an organic fertilizer, something such as a manure or a bone meal or a cottonseed meal or one of those other naturally occurring products, make sure that you work it into the garden very well. And you're going to use a lot higher concentration, whereas with the inorganic fertilizer, the man-made products, you're going to use that 2 to 3 pounds per 100 square foot. With an organic fertilizer, you're probably going to use more like 20 to 30 pounds per 100 square foot. And if you're using manures, just a word of caution, make sure that the manure has been composted. Do not use fresh manure, because the fresh manure, the nitrogen content is so high that it can potentially injure your plants. So if you're using manures, make sure that the manure has been composted, that it is not fresh. Now there are several ways to go about applying fertilizer. The first method I want to cover briefly is the broadcast method, typically broadcasting your fertilizer over your garden before planting. So with this method, you're going to broadcast it out and the fertilizer is spread evenly over the garden and then mixed into the soil to a depth of about 3 to 4 inches. So you'll broadcast your fertilizer and you might come back with a spade or with a shovel or maybe even with a rototiller and work that fertilizer into the soil. And as I said, this is done before planting. This might be done a few days, maybe even a few weeks before planting. With this broadcast method, this is the method of fertilizer application that is least likely to cause plant damage, because you're broadcasting the fertilizer out, working it into the soil before the plant is even there. So that fertilizer has a chance to dissipate or to spread out into the soil. It's not as concentrated. A second method of fertilizer application is band or row application. And with this method, the fertilizer is applied in a strip to the side of the row before planting. So you've got your raised beds or your rows of your garden, and you're going to apply the fertilizer along the edge of the row before planting. You want to be careful though, once you do plant, be careful to prevent the roots from coming into contact with the fertilizer band, because at high concentration of fertilizer can potentially kill the plants. The salts in those fertilizers can kill the plants. So you're making that application along the row or a band application. A third method of fertilizer application is using a starter solution. The starter solution is usually used only on transplants, such as maybe tomatoes or peppers or eggplants or maybe even cabbage. And to prepare a starter solution, you're going to mix up 2 tablespoons of a garden fertilizer in 1 gallon of water, stir well, and then you're going to pour 1 cup of the solution into the hole before you plant your transplant, and then you're going to let that soak into the soil, and then you're going to place your transplant in the hole. The fourth method of fertilizer application is making application actually to the growing plant, or we refer to it as side dressing. Side dressing is helpful on sandy soils, or maybe where there has been a lot of rain and a lot of the nutrient has leached from the soil. So side dressing can certainly be a benefit, and this is a way of fertilizer application whenever the plant is already in the ground. Now, if the with side dressing, the fertilizer is sprinkled alongside of the rows and watered into the soil. Now, you got to be careful whenever you're side dressing. You want to make sure that you water that fertilizer in, because that high concentration of fertilizer can damage the plant. So make sure that you water it in really good. Typically, when you're side dressing, you want to apply about a half a cup of a garden fertilizer for every 10 feet of row. So that's typically going to be a good rule of thumb if you're side dressing your plants. Now, that we're talking about, as we're doing this, we're thinking about spring garden, but you would fertilize your fall gardens in the same way as your spring gardens. Now, in the fall, if your fall garden follows a very well fertilized spring garden and you did everything that you needed to do in the spring to increase the nutrient level of your soil, you might not have to do as much fertilizing in the fall, maybe only applying about half of what you used in the spring. So probably coming back at a rate of about 1 to 2 pounds of a complete fertilizer per 100 square foot. There's a lot of resources in regards to fertilizing a garden at the Aggie Horticulture website, which can be found at aggie-horticulture.tamu.edu, or you can contact the Leon County Extension Office for additional information regarding the use of fertilizer in the garden. As I've mentioned also, there are several videos on the Leon County AgriLife Extension YouTube page that could be of benefit to you as well. So, you've got a little homework in order to get ready for your vegetable garden. Figure out, do I need to take a soil test, or what type of fertilizer do I need in order to give my plants the most nutrition possible so that I can enjoy the freshest, best vegetables possible. Until next time, happy gardening.